The alarm woke Captain Lee Junho from a dead sleep. He rolled out of his bunk and pulled on his uniform jacket in one smooth motion. 6 months in deep space had trained his body to react before his mind fully caught up. The red emergency lights painted the corridors of the Horizon's Promise in shades of warning as he made his way to the bridge. "Report," he said, sliding into his command chair. Park Minji looked up from her engineering console, her dark hair pulled back in a messy knot. "Distress beacon, Captain. Old model, maybe 15 years out of date. Coming from Krell 7, that mining planet we passed 2 days ago." Junho pulled up the data on his screen. Krell 7 was marked as abandoned in their charts. The mining company had pulled out a decade ago when the ore deposits ran dry. There shouldn't be anyone there sending distress signals. "Could be automated," said Choi Yuna from the navigation station. "Maybe just been broadcasting on loop for years." "Maybe," Junho agreed. But something felt wrong about it. "How far back would we need to go?" 8 hours, Yuna answered. "We could loop around, do a quick scan, and still stay on schedule for our checkpoint." Junho made the decision quickly. "Set course. If someone's actually in trouble out there, 8 hours could matter." The Horizon's Promise was a small ship, just 30 crew members, designed for long-range exploration and mapping. They weren't military, but they were well-trained. Every person aboard knew their job and did it well. That's why Junho trusted them with his life every single day. The planet came into view 6 hours later. Krell 7 was ugly, all brown rock and gray dust, the kind of place that existed just to be exploited and abandoned. A single settlement showed on their scanners, clustered around the old mining facility. "Life signs?" Junho asked as they entered orbit. Kim Daehyun, their medical officer, studied his readouts with a frown. "Hard to tell. The whole place is shielded with old mining equipment, lots of metal interference. But I'm not picking up anything obvious." "Take us down," Junho ordered. "Landing team will be myself, Minji, Daehyun, and Han Suhi. Yuna, you have the bridge." They suited up in the cargo bay. The atmosphere on Krell 7 was technically breathable, but full of dust and mining residue. Nobody wanted to spend more time breathing that than necessary. Yunyo checked his sidearm out of habit. They probably wouldn't need weapons, but probably wasn't the same as certainly. The settlement looked worse up close. Buildings had been torn open, their contents scattered. Blast marks scarred the walls. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't been peaceful. "Slavers," Minji said quietly, kneeling beside a broken door. "See these marks? Plasma cutters, military grade. They came through here looking for people." Junho felt his jaw tighten. Slavery was illegal in human space and most of the civilized galaxy. But out here in the Rim, laws were suggestions. The strong took what they wanted and the weak suffered. "Sweep the buildings," he ordered. "Look for survivors or bodies. I want to know what happened here." They split up, moving carefully through the wreckage. Yunyo found himself in what had been living quarters. Personal items were scattered everywhere, clothes, pictures, children's toys. He picked up a small stuffed animal, its fabric faded and torn. Someone had loved this once. "Captain," Suhi's voice crackled over the comm. "I've got something." Building 7, East Side, Junho ran. Building 7 was a processing facility, full of massive machines used for separating ore from rock. Suhi stood near a ventilation shaft, her scanner held up toward the opening. "There's something in there," she said. "Small heat signature. It's alive." Junho knelt down and pulled his helmet light closer to the vent opening. At first he saw nothing but darkness and shadows. Then something moved. 2 large eyes, reflecting his light like an animal's, stared back at him from the depths of the shaft. "Hey," he said softly. "It's okay. We're not here to hurt you." The eyes blinked but didn't move closer. Minji appeared beside him, her engineering kit already open. "I can take this vent cover off. Give them a way out that's easier than crawling through the whole system." She worked quickly, removing the bolts that held the metal grating in place. Junyo kept talking, his voice calm and steady. "We're humans. From the ship in orbit, we heard your distress signal. Are you hurt? Do you need help?" Minutes passed. Then slowly, carefully, something emerged from the vent. She was small. That was Junho's first thought. Small and thin, with skin the color of lavender flowers. Her hair was white, cut short and uneven like someone had hacked at it with a knife. She wore rags that might have once been clothing. But it was her eyes that stopped Junho's heart. They were huge and amber-colored and filled with a terror so deep it seemed to have no bottom. She was a child, an alien child, but a child nonetheless. Daehyun was already scanning her from a safe distance. Malnutrition, dehydration, multiple old injuries. She needs medical attention soon. Junho pulled off his helmet, wanting her to see his face. He moved slowly, carefully, like he was approaching a scared animal. Because that's what she was, scared and alone and probably expecting more pain. He reached into his supply pack and pulled out a water bottle and a ration bar. "Here," he said, setting them on the ground between them. "Food and water. You can have them." The girl's eyes locked onto the items. Her whole body trembled. Then, faster than Junho expected, she darted forward, grabbed both items, and retreated back against the wall. She tore into the ration bar with her teeth, barely chewing before swallowing. The water bottle was empty in seconds. "Easy," Daehyun said softly. "Too fast and you'll be sick." But she was already eating the second half of the bar. How long had it been since she'd had food? Days, weeks? Yunyo sat down on the dusty floor, making himself smaller and less threatening. "What's your name?" he asked, knowing she probably couldn't understand him. The girl stared at him, crumbs on her chin. She didn't answer. "I'm Junho," he said, pointing to himself. Then he pointed to the others. "Minji, Daehyun, Suhi." He pointed to her and raised his eyebrows in question. She watched him carefully. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she made a sound. It wasn't a word he recognized, just a soft chirping noise. "Okay," Junho said. "We'll figure out what to call you later. Right now, will you come with us? We have more food on the ship, and a medical bay where Daehyun can help you feel better." The girl looked between the four humans. She was calculating, Junho realized, trying to decide if this was a trap, wondering if kindness was just another kind of cruelty waiting to reveal itself. Finally, she nodded once. "Good," Junho said, standing slowly. "Let's go home." He held out his hand. After a long moment, the girl reached out and took it. Her fingers were cold and thin, and they shook in his grip. But she held on. They walked out of the ruined settlement together, leaving the ghosts behind. On the ship, Junho made a note in the log about finding one survivor. One small alien girl who had hidden in the vents while her world fell apart. He decided to call her Hana. In Korean it meant one. She was the only one who had survived. And Junho made a silent promise to himself that he would make sure she kept surviving, for as long as she needed him to. 3 weeks passed aboard the Horizon's Promise, and Hana remained a mystery wrapped in silence. She lived in a small cabin near the medical bay, spending her days watching the crew with those large amber eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 questions she couldn't ask. Daehyun checked on her every morning and evening. The physical recovery was slow but steady. She was gaining weight. Her skin looked less gray, and the cough from breathing bad air had finally stopped. But the emotional wounds were deeper than anything his medical equipment could measure. She flinched at loud noises. She refused to sleep with the door closed. She hoarded food in her cabin even though meals came regularly 3 times a day. When crew members walked too close, she pressed herself against walls like she was trying to disappear into them. But there were good moments too. Small victories that made the crew smile. Minji had given Hana a datapad loaded with pictures and simple learning programs. Hana spent hours with it, her fingers dancing across the screen as she absorbed information with startling speed. Within a week, she recognized written Korean characters. Within 2 weeks, she could read simple sentences. "She's brilliant," Minji told Junho one evening in the mess hall. "I mean, really brilliant. The way she learns, it's like watching a sponge soak up water. Her brain is working overtime to understand everything." Suhi had discovered that Hana loved music. The systems analyst played old Earth songs through the ship's speakers, and Hana would tilt her head and listen with complete focus. Sometimes she even hummed along, creating harmonies in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. "She sang today," Suhi reported excitedly. "Just a little bit, but she was actually singing. I think music makes her feel safe." Yuna taught Hana simple games using colored blocks and pattern recognition. The navigation officer had a gentle way about her that put Hana at ease. During their sessions, Hana's rigid posture would relax slightly, and occasionally the ghost of a smile would flicker across her face. But it was with Junho that Hana seemed most comfortable. The captain made time every day to sit with her, speaking in calm tones about nothing important. He told her about Earth, about oceans and mountains and seasons. He showed her pictures of his family back home. He never pushed her to respond or to trust him faster than she was ready. "You're good with her," Daehyun observed one afternoon, watching through the medical bay window as Junho and Hana sat together in comfortable silence. She's been through hell, Junho replied quietly. The least I can do is give her time to find her way back. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday, or at least what passed for Tuesday when you were measuring time in the depths of space. Hana had been wearing the same outfit for days, a soft gray jumpsuit that Minji had modified to fit her small frame. It was clean and comfortable, but Daehyun noticed that Hana kept tugging at the side, scratching at something underneath the fabric. Let me take a look, he said gently, gesturing to the examination table. You might have a rash from the new material. Some species react to synthetic fabrics. Hana hesitated, then climbed onto the table. She trusted Daehyun now at least a little bit. He had never hurt her during examinations. He always explained what he was doing. He moved slowly and gave her space to say no. Can you show me where it itches? Daehyun asked, holding up his scanner. Hana touched her left side just below her ribs. Okay, I need to see the skin to treat it properly. Is that all right? She nodded. Then, with the simple innocence of a child who didn't understand the significance of what she was revealing, Hana lifted her shirt. Daehyun's breath caught in his throat. The door opened behind him. Yunyo had come to check on them, carrying a cup of juice he knew Hana liked. He took 2 steps into the room, saw what Daehyun was staring at, and froze completely. Hana's torso was covered in scars, not just a few, not just old injuries from accidents or fights. The entire surface of her skin was marked with deliberate, systematic mutilation. Long cuts ran parallel to each other, spaced with mathematical precision. Burns formed patterns that could only have been made by holding her down and applying heat in specific spots. Brands and alien symbols covered her shoulders and ribs, the tissue raised and discolored. Some scars were old, faded to silver lines that must have been made years ago. Others were newer, still pink and healing. They overlapped and intersected, creating a map of pain that chronicled a childhood spent in agony. Junho's hand tightened on the cup until the plastic cracked. Juice spilled onto the floor, but he didn't notice. His vision had narrowed to those scars, and his mind was screaming with a rage so pure and cold it felt like drowning in ice water. Someone had done this, not accidentally, not in a moment of anger. Someone had taken this small, innocent being and hurt her over and over and over again. Someone had made a choice every single time to cause pain. Daehyun's professional training kicked in, but his hands were shaking. Hana, he said, his voice rough. I need to scan these, to make sure they're healing properly. Is that okay? Hana looked between them, confused by their reactions. She tilted her head, trying to understand why the 2 humans had gone so still and quiet. To her, the scars were just part of her body. They had always been there for as long as she could remember. Why did seeing them make the nice humans look so sad and angry? Daehyun ran his scanner slowly over her skin, documenting everything. His medical training told him what each mark represented. The straight cuts were from blades, probably done regularly, judging by the pattern. The burns were from plasma tools applied at low settings to maximize pain without killing. The brands were ownership marks, claiming her as property. He counted 47 distinct scars. 47 times someone had deliberately hurt a child. You can put your shirt down now, Daehyun said softly. Thank you for showing me. Hana lowered her shirt and touched the spot that had been itching. Daehyun applied a healing gel without really thinking about it, his mind somewhere else entirely. Hunyo hadn't moved. He stood in the doorway, the broken cup still in his hand, staring at nothing. His jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. Captain, Daehyun said quietly. Hunyo blinked and looked down at the mess he'd made. Sorry, he said automatically. Then he turned and walked out. He made it to his quarters before the shaking started. He sat on his bunk and put his head in his hands and breathed through the fury that threatened to consume him. He had seen violence before. He had seen war and death and the aftermath of cruelty. But this was different. This was a child. Someone had systematically tortured a child, had hurt her so many times that her entire body was a testament to their cruelty. And she had accepted it as normal. She had lifted her shirt without shame or hesitation, because she didn't understand that those scars represented something deeply wrong. There was a soft chime at his door. Yuna entered without waiting for permission, took one look at his face and sat down beside him. Daehyun told me, she said simply. Hunyo nodded, not trusting his voice. We need to find out who did this, Yuna continued. We need to understand her species, where she came from, why someone would... She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. We will, Junho said. His voice was flat and cold. We'll find out everything. And then we'll make sure it never happens again. Yuna stood and put her hand on his shoulder. She's safe now. That's what matters. She's safe with us. After she left, Junho pulled up Hana's file on his console. He added a new entry, documenting what they had discovered. He attached Daehyun's medical scans, each image a record of unforgivable crimes. Then he sent a priority message to Earth Command. They needed to know. Someone in the vast database of alien species and civilizations would recognize those marks. Someone would know what Hana was and where she came from. And when they found out, Junho promised himself, there would be a reckoning. Down in her cabin, Hana curled up in her bed with the datapad Minji had given her. She was learning about Earth animals now. Dogs looked nice. Cats looked soft. She wondered if she would ever get to see one. The itchy spot on her side felt better. Daehyun had fixed it like he always fixed things. She was glad the nice humans took care of her. She was starting to believe that maybe they wouldn't hurt her after all. She didn't understand why they had looked so upset. But then again, there was a lot about humans she didn't understand yet. They were strange and gentle, and they made her feel something she couldn't quite name. Something warm and safe and completely unfamiliar. Tomorrow she decided she would try to use more words. She was getting better at Korean. Maybe she could tell Captain Junho thank you. That seemed like something humans would like to hear. She fell asleep with the datapad still glowing beside her, showing pictures of golden retrievers playing in green grass under a blue sky she had never seen. The response from Earth Command came faster than expected. Within 48 hours, Junho's priority message had reached the right desks and triggered the right alarms. A xenobiologist named Dr. Patricia Wells contacted them directly via quantum link, her face grave on the view screen. The scars you documented match a known pattern, she said without preamble. Your survivor is Liss. They're a species from the Karath Empire's territory. Captain, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. But given what you've found, you need to know everything. Junho, Yuna, and Daehyun sat in the conference room listening as Dr. Wells explained. The rest of the crew had been told only that they were investigating Hana's origins. Some things were too dark to share widely, at least not yet. The Liss evolved on a planet called Lysara, which was conquered by the Karath Empire about 200 years ago. Dr. Wells continued. They have some unusual biological traits that made them particularly valuable to their conquerors. They heal rapidly from injuries. They have a longer lifespan than most species, averaging around 200 standard years. And their nervous systems are extremely sensitive, which means they feel pain more intensely than most beings. That's not valuable, Yuna said quietly. That's horrifying. To us, yes. To the Karath, it made them perfect slaves. They could work in dangerous conditions and heal from injuries that would permanently disable other species. They could survive punishments that would kill others. And they lived long enough to provide decades of service. Daehyun's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. What about the scars? The patterns we documented? Dr. Wells pulled up images that made all three humans stiffen. They were diagrams of Liss bodies marked with various symbols and patterns. The Karath developed a system. Different scars mean different things. Ownership marks identify which family or corporation holds them. Punishment marks record infractions. Training marks, she paused, her own disgust evident. Training marks are inflicted on young Liss to teach them obedience through pain conditioning. She's a child, Junho said, his voice dangerously quiet. They start young. The Karath believe that Liss trained from childhood are more compliant, more useful. The scars your survivor carries suggest she was being groomed for specialized service. Possibly domestic work in a high-status household or worse? The conference room fell silent. On the screen, Dr. Wells looked as sick as they felt. How many? Yunyo finally asked. How many Liss are enslaved? We estimate between 5 and 8 million across Karath space. But that's just an estimate. The Karath don't exactly publish census data on their slave population. Most of the galaxy knows about it but does nothing, because the Karath are powerful and the Liss have no homeworld anymore. Lysara was strip-mined and abandoned decades ago. After the call ended, the three sat in silence. Then Junho stood abruptly. I need to talk to her. Hana needs to tell us her story as much as she can. We need to understand what happened to her specifically. She's not ready, Daehyun warned. The psychological trauma, I'll be gentle. But we need to know. Over the following weeks, Junho worked carefully with Hana. Her Korean had improved dramatically, enough for simple conversations. She was smart and motivated, soaking up language like she had soaked up everything else the crew taught her. The story came out in pieces, scattered across quiet conversations in her cabin or the observation deck where she liked to watch the stars. Sometimes she drew pictures on the datapad to show what words couldn't express. Sometimes she just spoke haltingly, searching for vocabulary to describe horrors no child should know. She had been born on a station called Recor 3. She didn't know her parents. List children born into slavery were separated from their mothers almost immediately and raised in group facilities. She remembered sleeping in a large room with many other young lists, all of them learning to stay quiet and obey. The training started when she was very young, maybe 3 or 4 years old by human counting, though she had no concept of ages or years. The Karath trainers used pain to teach lessons. Speak without permission, get cut. Move too slowly, get burned. Cry too loudly, get branded. They said pain makes us better. Hana told Junho one evening, her voice small. They said we need to learn. That it helps us. Junho had to take a moment before responding. His hands were clenched into fists under the table where she couldn't see. No, he said firmly. They were wrong. Pain doesn't make anyone better. What they did to you was wrong. Do you understand? Hana looked confused. But all lists get trained. It's normal. Normal doesn't mean right. Just because something happens to everyone doesn't make it okay. She thought about that for a long time. The specific scars each had their own story. The long cuts on her ribs were from a lesson about staying still. She had fidgeted during an inspection and been punished. The burns on her shoulders were from the time she took extra food because she was hungry. The brands were ownership marks. She had belonged to 3 different masters before ending up at the mining colony. Why were you at the mining colony? Yuna asked gently during one of their sessions together. Master Vorik bought me. He said I would work in his household when I was older. But first I had to stay at the colony while he finished business. He left me with the overseer. Hana's amber eyes grew distant. Then the bad men came. They had big ships and weapons. Everyone ran or fought. The overseer told me to hide, so I climbed into the vents like I was taught for emergencies. You stayed there until we found you? Hana nodded. 5 days. I had water from the condensation pipes. No food. I heard the bad men searching. I stayed quiet. I'm good at staying quiet. 5 days. She had been 7 years old and alone in the vents for 5 days, listening to slavers hunt through the ruins above her, not knowing if anyone would ever come. So he compiled all the information into a detailed report. She was the best at organizing data, finding patterns in chaos. What emerged was a picture of systematic abuse spanning generations. The Karath had been breeding lists for specific traits. They selected for intelligence but punished independent thinking. They encouraged the rapid healing trait but used it as an excuse for harsher treatment. They had turned an entire species into tools, objects without rights or dignity. There are more like her, Suhi said during a crew briefing. Millions more. Children being tortured right now to make them better slaves. Adults who have known nothing but pain their entire lives. A whole civilization that's been erased and replaced with living property. The crew sat in stunned silence. Minji spoke up, her voice shaking with anger. What are we going to do about it? We report everything to Earth Command, Junho said. We provide all the evidence we've gathered. We let the politicians and military leaders decide the next steps. That's not enough, Minji protested. It's what we can do. We're an exploration vessel with 30 crew members. We can't fight an empire. But we can tell everyone what we found, Yuna added. Oh, we can make sure Earth knows. That everyone knows. Sometimes the truth is its own kind of weapon. That night, Junho filed his report. He included Hana's testimony, the medical scans, Dr. Wells's analysis, and Suhi's compiled data. He included pictures of Hana smiling as she learned to read, contrasted with the scans of her mutilated body. He made sure every person who read that report would understand exactly what the Karath Empire had done. He encrypted it at the highest level and sent it through every channel he had access to Earth Command, to the United Earth Council, to the Department of Interspecies Relations, to news organizations that he trusted to handle sensitive material responsibly. Then he went to Hana's cabin. She was awake, curled up with a blanket, staring out her small window at the stars. Can't sleep? He asked softly. She shook her head. Thinking. About what? About the other lists, the ones still with the Karath. Do they know that being hurt is wrong? Or do they think it's normal like I did? Yuno sat down beside her bed. I don't know. Probably most of them think it's normal. That's what happens when bad things are all you know. Will you help them? She asked, looking up at him with those huge amber eyes. I'll try. I can't promise anything, but I'll try. Hana nodded slowly. Then she reached out and took his hand, her small fingers curling around his. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for teaching me that I'm not supposed to hurt. Junho squeezed her hand gently. You're safe now. I promise you're safe. As he left her cabin and walked back through the quiet corridors of his ship, Junho wondered if that promise was enough. One child saved out of millions suffering. One small victory in the face of enormous injustice. But somewhere on Earth his report was being read. Somewhere people were seeing those scars and feeling the same cold rage he had felt. Somewhere decisions were being made. He didn't know it yet, but he had just lit a fire that would burn across the galaxy. Humans had just learned that somewhere in the darkness of space, children were being tortured, and humanity, with all its flaws and violence and capacity for righteous fury, was about to respond. The report reached Earth on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, it had been declassified and released to the public. The Council had debated keeping it secret, but ultimately decided that something this important needed to be seen by everyone. Humanity needed to know what was happening in the galaxy they were just beginning to explore. The images spread across every network, every news feed, every social platform. A small alien girl with lavender skin and amber eyes smiling as she learned to read, and beside that image the medical scans showing what had been done to her body. 47 scars, 47 deliberate acts of torture inflicted on a child. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. On Earth, in the colonies on Mars and Luna, in the stations scattered across human space, everywhere people saw those images. Something ancient and primal stirred. It didn't matter what language they spoke or what culture they came from. The response was universal and visceral. Protests erupted outside Karath embassy buildings on Earth within hours. Crowds gathered holding signs with Hana's face demanding action. The Karath ambassador tried to give a press conference explaining that slavery was a cultural practice, and humans had no right to interfere. He was shouted down by a mob so angry that police had to evacuate him for his own safety. On Mars, the colonial government passed an emergency resolution. All trade with Karath-aligned worlds was suspended immediately. Any Karath citizens on Mars were given 72 hours to leave. Any ship flying Karath colors was banned from Martian space. The Luna stations went further. They froze all Karath assets in their banking systems and offered asylum to any Liss who could reach their territory. Within days, they had set up refugee centers even though they had no refugees yet. They were preparing for a flood they hoped would come. Social media exploded with hashtags. Shores free the Liss, justice for Hana. Now never again. Artists created illustrations. Writers penned stories. Musicians composed songs. All of them centered on the same theme, that what was happening to the Liss was unacceptable, and humanity would not look away. The galactic community watched with confusion and growing concern. The Liss situation had been known for decades. Many species found it distasteful, but accepted it as an internal Karath matter. Why were humans reacting so violently to something that was, in the grand scheme of galactic politics, relatively common? They didn't understand. They had never been human. Humans had a particular relationship with their children. It was wired deep into their biology, reinforced by every culture and society they had ever created. Hurt a human child and you didn't just offend one person or one family. You triggered a protective rage that existed at the species level. Throughout human history, the greatest atrocities had always involved children. The greatest heroes were often those who protected the innocent. The worst villains were those who harmed them. It was the one moral absolute that transcended human differences. Across all cultures, all religions, all political systems, humans agreed, you don't hurt kids. And now humanity had learned that millions of alien children were being systematically tortured. That it was legal, organized, and accepted. That the galaxy knew and did nothing. The response was as predictable as gravity. In the United Earth Council chambers, the debate raged for 3 days straight. The chamber was packed with representatives from every nation, every colony, every voice that humanity could muster. The pragmatists argued for caution. The Karath Empire has a fleet 3 times the size of ours. We've been exploring space for only 50 years. They've been a starfaring civilization for millennia. Starting a war over this is suicide, the moralists countered. Then we die for something that matters. What's the point of reaching for the stars if we lose our humanity along the way? Others sought middle ground. Economic sanctions. Diplomatic pressure. We can make change without firing a shot. Sanctions don't stop torture, came the reply. Words don't heal scars. Those children are suffering right now while we debate. In living rooms and coffee shops across Earth, similar debates played out. Families argued over dinner. Friends stopped speaking to each other over disagreements about intervention versus isolation. The question divided humanity more sharply than anything had in decades. But then a video went viral. It was taken aboard the Horizon's Promise. Minji had recorded it on her personal device without really thinking about it. Hana was in the observation deck with Junho, looking at Earth on the view screen as they approached for resupply. She had asked what the blue parts were, and Junho had explained about oceans. "Can I see one?" Hana asked in careful Korean. "Can I see water?" "Yes," Junho promised. "When we dock, we'll go down and I'll take you to the ocean. You can put your feet in the water." Hana had smiled then, a real smile full of wonder and hope. "I've never seen an ocean. I've never put my feet in water. Just pipes and machines." The video was only 20 seconds long, but those 20 seconds showed everything. A child's innocent desire to experience something simple and beautiful. A child who had known only pain, discovering the possibility of joy. A child who had been treated as an object, learning what it felt like to be a person. The video was watched 2 billion times in the first week. After that, the debate effectively ended. You couldn't watch that video and argue for doing nothing. You couldn't see that smile and accept that millions more like her would never get to experience such simple happiness. The United Earth Council passed Resolution 2157 with only 12 dissenting votes out of 217. The resolution was clear. The enslavement of the Lys people by the Karath Empire constituted a crime against sapient life. Humanity demanded their immediate freedom. Failure to comply would result in appropriate measures. The Karath response was dismissive. Their hegemon, a being named Vorathkul who had ruled for 3 centuries, issued a statement that was almost mocking in tone. The young species called humanity presumes to lecture the Karath Empire on matters of governance. We have maintained order in our territories for longer than humans have had written language. The Lys are property under our law. This is not subject to the approval of outsiders. We suggest the humans focus on their own insignificant corner of the galaxy and leave civilized species to manage their affairs. It was possibly the worst thing he could have said. The military mobilization began immediately. Earth Fleet, which had been primarily focused on exploration and defense, began retooling for offensive operations. Ship construction went into overtime. Weapons systems that had been theoretical suddenly received unlimited funding and priority development. But this wasn't just a military operation. This was humanity going to war, and humans waged war in ways the galaxy had never seen. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Millions of humans wanted to be part of the liberation. Combat veterans came out of retirement. Academy graduates accelerated their training. Medical personnel signed up for deployment. Engineers and technicians volunteered to build the ships that would carry the warriors. The strange thing was the unity. Earth had always been fractious, divided by old grievances and competing interests. But this brought them together in a way nothing else had. From Beijing to New York, from Lagos to São Paulo, from Sydney to Moscow, the message was the same. Free the Lys. Protect the children. Make it right. Junho watched all of this from his ship as they docked at Earth Station Alpha. The news feeds showed him the protests, the mobilization, the anger and determination spreading across his species. He felt proud and terrified in equal measure. "We started something," Yuna said quietly, standing beside him. "Hana started it," Junho corrected. "We just told her story." The station was chaotic with activity. Ships were being refitted. Troops were boarding transports. Supplies were being loaded in quantities that suggested a long campaign. The humans were preparing for war, but not the kind of war the galaxy understood. This wouldn't be a war of conquest or resources. This would be a war of liberation. A war fought not for territory or wealth, but for the abstract principle that slavery was wrong, and children should not suffer. Most of the galaxy thought humans were insane. Some thought they were dangerously naive. A few, just a few, wondered if maybe humanity understood something the rest of them had forgotten. Meanwhile, Junho had a promise to keep. He took Hana down to Earth in a shuttle, along with Daehyun, who wanted to make sure she was healthy enough for the trip. They landed at a beach in Korea, not far from where Junho had grown up. Hana stood on the sand for the first time, feeling it shift under her feet. She stared at the ocean, vast and blue and moving like a living thing. Junho took her hand and walked with her to the water's edge. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, her amber eyes wide. The first wave washed over her feet. Cool and strange and wonderful, Hana made a sound of pure delight, something between a laugh and a chirp. She splashed in the shallow water, watching it sparkle in the sunlight, experiencing something millions of List children had never known: simple, uncomplicated joy. A photographer happened to be nearby. She took a picture without thinking, just capturing a beautiful moment. A child playing in the ocean, a man watching her with a gentle smile, the sun setting over the water. That photograph became the symbol of what humanity was fighting for. It appeared on recruiting posters, on the sides of warships, on banners carried into battle. It reminded every human soldier what they were fighting for, not just Hana, but every child like her. Every innocent being who deserved the chance to play in the ocean. That night, Hana fell asleep exhausted and happy in a hotel room overlooking the water. Junho sat by the window watching the waves and thought about what was coming. The fleet would deploy in 3 months. The Karath still didn't believe humanity would actually fight. They would learn. Humanity was about to teach the galaxy a lesson that should never have needed teaching. You don't hurt children. Not ever, not for any reason. And if you do, humans will come for you with the full fury of a species that guards its young above all else. The liberation of the List took 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days. Historians would later call it the Compassion War, though some preferred the humanitarian intervention. The Karath called it the human madness right up until they surrendered. It began with a single planet. The human fleet appeared in orbit around Talcor 5, a Karath world known for its slave markets. Admiral Chen Taeyong broadcast a simple message in every language the translators knew. All lists currently on this world are now free under the protection of Earth. Any being who resists this liberation will be considered an enemy combatant. You have 24 hours to release all lists in your possession and evacuate the slave facilities. This is not a negotiation. The Karath governor laughed and sent a battle group to drive off the presumptuous humans. The battle lasted 45 minutes. The Karath lost 16 ships. The humans lost none. The galaxy had not realized how far human military technology had come. 50 years of desperate innovation, driven by the fear of being alone in a dangerous universe, had produced weapon systems that shocked even human command. Railguns that could punch through shields like paper, missile swarms guided by AI that predicted enemy movements, electronic warfare capabilities that could shut down entire fleets. But the real difference was not in the technology. It was in the motivation. Human soldiers fought like their own children were imprisoned on those worlds. They took risks that seemed insane, performed acts of bravery that became legends. A Marine named Kim Min-jae held a checkpoint alone for 6 hours against Karath reinforcements, allowing 300 lives to escape. He survived with 14 separate injuries and received humanity's highest honor for valor. A pilot named Park Sora flew her damaged fighter directly into a slave facility's shield generator, sacrificing herself to open a path for rescue teams. They saved over 2,000 lists that day because of her choice. Again and again, humans threw themselves into impossible situations. Not for territory, not for glory, for people they had never met, who looked nothing like them, who they couldn't even speak to yet. The Karath had never encountered anything like it. In their long history, wars were fought for rational reasons: resources, territory, dominance. Species didn't sacrifice themselves for aliens. It made no sense, but sense had nothing to do with it. This was about right and wrong, about protection and justice, about the simple human conviction that children deserved better than to be broken and scarred and treated as objects. The liberation followed a pattern. Human forces would arrive at a world. They would demand the surrender of all slave facilities. Most governors refused, confident in their defenses. The humans would systematically dismantle those defenses, extract every list they could find, and leave behind detailed evidence of crimes committed. Importantly, humans didn't wage war on the Karath people. They didn't bomb cities or target civilians. They destroyed military assets, freed slaves, and moved on. This was surgical, focused, and relentless. "We're not here to conquer you," Admiral Chen said in a broadcast after the liberation of the 10th world. "We're here to free the lists. Surrender them peacefully and we'll leave peacefully. Fight us and we'll still take them. But you'll lose ships and stations and the respect of the galaxy. Your choice." By the end of the first year, humanity had freed over 300,000 lists. Refugee ships carried them to safe zones established in neutral space. Human medical teams treated centuries of accumulated trauma. Human educators taught them about rights and choices and freedom. And every freed Liss heard about Hana. About the little girl whose scars had started everything. About how she was safe now, living on Earth with her adopted father, learning and growing and healing. Hana herself grew up in a strange spotlight. She was famous across human space, the symbol of both horror and hope. But Junho did his best to give her as normal a childhood as possible. She attended school with human children who treated her like any other student. She made friends. She discovered she loved mathematics and music. She learned to swim in the ocean she had splashed in that first day. The scars remained. Liss' healing was remarkable but not miraculous. She would carry those marks forever. But they meant something different now. They were no longer symbols of ownership and pain. They were testament to survival. Proof that she had endured and come through the other side. Sometimes she had nightmares. Sometimes sudden noises made her flinch. Sometimes she struggled with trusting new people. Daehyun, who had retired from the fleet to focus on trauma therapy for freed Liss, helped her work through it all. Progress was slow but real. By the end of year 2, the Karath Empire was fracturing. Many worlds within their territory didn't actually support slavery. They had simply accepted it because the hegemon demanded it. When they saw that humans were willing to fight for the Liss, some began to question their own government. A Karath colony called Navara declared independence and freed all Liss within their territory without human intervention. They asked for Earth's protection against inevitable retaliation. Humanity agreed. 3 more colonies followed within a month. The hegemon Varathkol gave increasingly unhinged speeches about human barbarism and the natural order of strong over weak. His own council began to turn against him. Economic collapse followed military defeats. The Karath currency dropped to a fraction of its former value. Trade partners distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with a losing side. The end came not with a great battle, but with an assassination. Varathkol's own security chief killed him in his throne room and immediately opened negotiations with Earth. The new hegemon, a younger Karath named Vanishka, was pragmatic enough to see that the war was lost. The Treaty of Liberated Skies was signed on a neutral station with representatives from Earth, the Karath Empire, and the Lice Assembly, a newly formed government representing the freed Liss people. The terms were simple. All remaining Liss slaves would be freed immediately. The practice of slavery was now illegal throughout former Karath space.
Any beings found enslaving others would be tried by an interspecies court.
Reparations would be paid to the Liss people. And most importantly, the Karath would formally acknowledge that what they had done was wrong. That last part was Hana's idea. Now 13 years old and fluent in multiple languages, she had insisted on it during the negotiations. They need to say it, she told the human diplomats. They need to admit it was wrong. Otherwise they'll just think they lost to a stronger enemy, not that they were wrong to begin with. The galaxy watched as Hegemon Venishka read the formal apology. It was broadcast on every network, translated into every language, acknowledging crimes, accepting responsibility, promising change. It wasn't enough. Nothing could truly compensate for what had been done. But it was a start. The freed Liss faced enormous challenges, an entire species traumatized and displaced, trying to build a society from nothing. They had no homeworld, no shared culture beyond pain, no infrastructure or institutions. Humanity helped. Humans were good at building things, and they poured resources into establishing Liss colonies on worlds donated by various governments. Human teachers worked with Liss to develop education systems. Human therapists trained Liss counselors to help their own people heal. Human engineers taught Liss to maintain the technology of their new homes. But humans couldn't do it for them. The Liss had to find their own path forward. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, they did. A decade after the liberation, the first generation of free Liss children came of age. They had been born after the war, Raised in freedom, taught that they had value and rights and potential, they became teachers and artists and engineers and doctors. They built lives their ancestors could never have imagined. One of them, a young Liss woman named Kiva, became a renowned musician. She composed a symphony called Scars to Stars that became famous across the galaxy. It told the story of suffering transformed into strength, of survival becoming triumph. When asked about her inspiration, Kiva always mentioned Hana. She showed us what was possible. She survived the worst and still learned to smile. She carried her scars but didn't let them define her. That's what we all try to do. Hana herself never sought the spotlight again. She finished her education on Earth, studying xenopsychology and trauma recovery. She wanted to help others heal the way she had been helped. She worked quietly, treating freed slaves of various species, teaching other therapists, writing papers about recovery from systemic abuse. She married a human man named Lee Dongwook, a gentle artist who made her laugh. They had children. Adoption was complex for interspecies families, but Earth had updated its laws. Her kids were humanless and one Kareth child who had been orphaned in the war. She loved them fiercely and protected them absolutely. But she was careful not to let her trauma make her overprotective. They needed to learn and grow and take risks just like all children. On the 20th anniversary of her rescue, there was a ceremony. The Horizon's Promise had been decommissioned and turned into a museum orbiting Earth. Junho, now old and gray but still sharp-eyed, stood with Hana at the exhibit dedicated to that day they found her hiding in the vents. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked him quietly. "Everything that happened because of me? The war, the deaths, all of it?" Junho looked at her, this woman who had once been a terrified child, and smiled. "Not for a second. You didn't start a war, Hana. You revealed an injustice. What humanity did with that information was our choice, and I'm proud of the choice we made." Hana touched the glass display where her old ragged clothes were preserved. "Sometimes I still have nightmares. Sometimes I wake up thinking I'm back there. I know. Healing isn't linear. Some wounds never fully close. But they do get easier to carry," Hana said. "The scars are still there, but they don't hurt the same way anymore." They stood together looking at the historical displays. Pictures of the liberation, testimonials from freed Liss, statistics about lives saved and families reunited. And in the center, that photograph of a small alien girl splashing in the ocean, discovering joy for the first time. The Liss had a saying now, spread across their growing civilization. It was taught to children and repeated at important occasions. It went, "Scars remember, but hearts can choose what grows around them." Hana had chosen to let love grow, to build a life defined not by what had been done to her, but by what she chose to do with her freedom. To be more than her trauma, more than a symbol, more than a victim. She was a survivor, a healer, a mother, a person with worth and agency and a future full of possibilities. And across the galaxy, millions of other Liss were making the same choice, building lives, creating art, raising children who knew only freedom, writing their own stories instead of having stories written on their skin and scars. The liberation was complete, not because the war was won, but because the freed were finally free to decide who they wanted to be. That night, Hana went home to her family. Her children wanted to hear the story again, the one about how she was found and rescued and how everything changed. She told them, editing the worst parts because they were still young. "Were you scared?" her youngest asked. "Yes, very scared, but you were brave." Hana smiled and pulled her child close. "Brave just means being scared and doing what you need to do anyway. Everyone can be brave, even when things are hard." Later, after the children were asleep, she stood in her garden under Earth's moon and stars. She touched the scars beneath her shirt, feeling the raised tissue that would never fully fade. They were part of her story, but not the end of it. The end was still being written. Every day was a new sentence, a new paragraph, a new chapter in a life that was finally, completely her own. And somewhere in the vastness of space, on worlds scattered across the galaxy, other Liss were writing their own stories too. Different stories, better stories, stories of hope and healing and the simple, profound joy of being free.